another Neptunia game for the Switch has emerged, Neptunia Sisters vs. Sisters. A game I have reviewed before when it was released initially on PC and PlayStation consoles. I enjoyed the game very much. It's far from perfect, but I really enjoyed the tone of the story and how its parody levels and commentary was very much in line with how it was in the PS3 era. The graphical improvements were also a nice touch. But now we take a look at the Switch version, which was just released. Idea Factory provided me with a download code so I could give it a try. As always, I'm very thankful. Because people always seem to ask this about this game, yes, the Switch, as well as the upcoming Xbox release, will have the revised dialogue and text. In case you don't know, the previous PlayStation and PC releases had a patch that revised some text in the dialogue as well as some items in order to comply with the ESRB. People believe that specifically they didn't put in the language content descriptor that you see beside the ESRB rating, so they had to tone down the already pretty tame language and remove some light swearing. Since alteration and censorship is such a topic with niche Japanese games, I figure you should know about that if you weren't aware or are wondering. Neptunia Sisters vs. Sisters is a spin-off, so I'm gonna assume you know about the premise of the Neptunia series. Instead of the regular turn-based format, battles are done in real time where you can run around. So it's kind of like an action RPG, kind of. In terms of plot, it is part of the main storyline, which is why some people argue that this isn't a spin-off, but things can still be a spin-off, even if they're canon. The main character isn't Neptune, it's her little sister Nepgear this time round. Neptune, Noir, Vert, and Blonde go to the PC continent in order to investigate an SOS signal. As that happens, Nepgear and Co. investigate a horde of monsters that was suddenly spotted near Planetoon. After entering a cave, they find a mysterious research facility. Inside, they find a capsule with a girl in it who looks like a goddess. After she awakens, she seems to recognize Nepgear, but she still ends up trapping the CPU candidates in the capsule, which causes them to fall into a slumber. After the screen fades to black, we can hear voices, and the CPU candidates are woken up. It turns out they were in there for 2 whole years, and a lot has changed in their absence. Game industry is in turmoil as monster outbreaks called trendy outbreaks have been ravaging the nations. Planetoon was especially affected because not only did they not have their goddess candidate for 2 years, but Neptune also went missing on her trip to the PC continent, which experienced a great calamity, leaving them without a goddess for that entire time. On top of that, the nations find themselves with low amount of shares, which has been taken away by a new device called the R-Phone, and now many people spend a ton of time on those devices and become addicted to social media and gacha games. I think the story is handled quite well. It manages to tackle a bunch of topics that have been going on in recent years in the gaming industry. Nepgear and Co. being asleep for years means they haven't been able to keep up to date, and it's amusing to see them confused about the newest things that are going on. Also, it seems that this game predicted Fuamoko. If you've played Neptunia mainline games, you'll probably find a lot of what you see familiar in terms of gameplay. You've got a world map. The map has various locations or dungeons that have multiple floors or levels to them. When you're running around a dungeon, there's various items you can collect and monsters to fight. Fights start when you come into contact with enemies. Instead of the usual turn-based affair, it's now real-time and AP-based. Fights take place within a circle which you can run around in freely. As you're attacking, you are prompted to switch to other characters, which will extend the combo. Each character's combo paths are something that you have to set up in these settings, which is similar to how it's done in main games. Additionally, you can also block, but you'll probably see no evidence of that in this footage. For some reason, I just forgot that that's a thing in this game. But you can advance into the game pretty well without blocking, to be honest. Nothing a little bit of grinding won't fix. In battle, you can use items, and if your meters are up, transform, use special attacks, and all of those sorts of things. Because of the AP system, there's still a turn-based feel to the fights. I don't really mind that. There are other things like disc development, which allows you to craft items that you can equip to make your character stronger. I don't feel that's necessary if you just want to play through the story. I was advancing just fine without it. Grinding doesn't take that long, and you can always equip new weapons and other accessories that you can buy at the store. When it comes to leveling up, experience is divided up between all characters, not just your active party. I like that because that means you can change out characters without having to worry about them being terribly weak just because I haven't used them up until now. The Lily rank system is back, but in a simplified way. It's called Lily Formation. It's there to pair up characters with non-fighting ones in order to gain passive effects. There's no actual friendship or affection level, it's all about character level. So it's not as fun as it used to be where you would get voice lines or things like that the closer characters become. The game will tell you where to go in terms of the story. There will be quest markers and event markers on the world map and also in dungeons. Side quests can be accessed through Chirper, the Neptunia equivalent of Twitter. A nice little feature is that you can see on the world map which places you need to go to and even which floors or levels specifically. That saves you a bit of time when you're, trying to find certain gatherable items or specific monsters. There are several save spots dotted around, which you'll see also have some other functions, most notably being able to go back to the world map so you don't have to run around all the way back to the entrance just to get out of a dungeon. That's super convenient. One of the things I'm not too fond of is that you only have 3 active party members like with the first Neptunia game. The way the characters are paired up, it makes sense to have 4. That way you could have all the 4 goddesses or little sisters active at once, or you could have 2 pairs of characters. That's why it was changed to 4 active party members early on. Not sure why they reverted in this game. Speaking of characters, Maho and Anri are playable on the Switch and only on the Switch. I find that really disappointing. To be perfectly honest, I don't want to play Neptunia games on the Switch because they usually run so much better on other systems. And other people feel the same. Having these 2 as Switch exclusives feels kind of like an artificial way to push people who already bought this game to double dip. The Swimsuit DLC is also exclusive to the Digital Deluxe Edition, which I also don't like that, obviously. Again, some people will buy the game twice, physically and digitally, just for that. But what's the point of a physical limited edition when it doesn't have all the things? I'm sure what'll happen is that the rise in digital sales will be an excuse to get rid of all physical releases in the future, and then all we have is a LE with a little piece of paper that has a download code on it. Just to go back to Maho and Anri, one thing about them that's great is that they're not overpowered. If you look at the, like for example, the Rebirth games, the DLC characters were like super strong and made every enemy and boss a complete pushover, especially in the early part of the game, but that's not the case here. I'm glad they made them a bit more in line with the other playable characters in terms of strength. Also, finally, we get to see Anri's transparent outfit in 3D, which is great. Surprisingly, it has a really neat rainbow effect on it. I didn't notice that at first, but it's kind of cool. There's no indication in any of the art or 2D sections of the game that her outfit has this rainbow shimmer. I bet someone just played around with stuff during development and thought, hey, that's cool, and put it in. So, whatever the case, I approve. Also nice is the inclusion of urban environments. Finally, we can see and walk around Planetoon. It's nice to see various things we only saw in cutscene illustrations finally brought into a 3-dimensional, run-aroundable space. In terms of world building, that really helps. Just one little strange thing I noticed is that with shooting type attacks, they sometimes don't hit short enemies. With Anri, her gunshots miss these tiny enemies. You can see the aim is calibrated to hit a character around the middle, if they're approximately the height of a human, but that's sometimes not the case. Also with Uni, some of her shots don't connect either, often when an enemy has fallen over. Though if it were melee attacks, they would hit. You have to wait for them to get back up, which can ruin your combo, or you have to switch to another character. Pretty annoying because it happens often. Let's discuss graphics and performance. A bit of a topic when it comes to any Switch port. I think the game looks and performs okay for the hardware for the most part. Textures just aren't going to be super sharp, and you can see, like shaders for example, that they aren't that advanced as they are on other systems. There's 2 lines pretty close to the character where you can see the textures becoming less blurry, but even at its sharpest, it's not very sharp. Also, the urban environments really suffer a lot from the lack of advanced shading. The PS5 game, for example, looks quite good in that regard. Additionally, the shadows are super blocky. The worst is that the shadows characters cast on themselves is blocky, so you basically see it all the time and there's this blocky stuff all over the character models. I've also noticed a strange difference between the Switch and PS5 versions when it comes to battling, or specifically after the battle on the Switch there's a victory pose animation that plays. I actually kind of like it because characters have their own poses that reflect their personalities, but on the PS5 there isn't one. It just goes in and out of battle. It took me a little bit to realize why that is. On the PS5 and presumably the other versions as well, battle happens where you come in contact with the enemies, as in like that exact area of the map. On the Switch, it goes into a battle stage instead, which explains the victory pose as it serves as a transition between the dungeon and the battle stage. It's also not very seamless when it does that because it does stutter, unfortunately. Despite me liking the victory poses, when just grinding, for example, it's nicer how well the game flows into and out of battle on the PS5, because some battles are quick and then, it's kind of weird then on the Switch. It feels a bit choppy, that entire experience. The transformation sequences are unfortunately very cut short compared to other games, which is too bad. I quite like them. Most of the time people skip them, me included, but sometimes you just want to watch them, right? So why not include them and then have them skippable like in other games? There's also various special attack cutaways that occur, and they look pretty good. The game does benefit from new dungeons, though they appear to be modular. You'll notice repeating parts, and that's probably how they're assembled, just by sections. Sometimes you feel like you're going in circles, even if you're not, because some of the areas just look the same. Especially because you have to often find switches to open doors, so you're doing lots of running back and forth. One highlight are the various urban places. I already mentioned them before. They aren't rendered very well on the Switch in my opinion, but I like that they're there because we always hear about places like Planetoon being modern and futuristic, but we don't see these places outside of cutscenes. So it's nice to be able to walk around in those areas. They're probably the most unique and well-designed locations in the game. And yes, of course, I know that some previous games like Victory and V2R did have some locations where you can run around Planetoon, but that was like a specific dungeon. But here there's more places to actually run around in. And if you're on Planet Tower, you can look down and even recognize some buildings, so I think that's pretty cool. The 2D cutscenes are very much enhanced in this game. Neptunia wasn't the first, but it was one of the first games to use live 2D technology over 10 years ago. Ever since VTubers became popular at the end of 2019 and beginning to mid-2020, the quality of live 2D just went way up. Neptunia really had some catching up to do, so that's nice that they actually did some changes now. There's just more going on with, character poses and expressions, and that livens things up. Some Switch quirks include some stuttery transitions in the cutscenes when characters move around, for example. And the other really noticeable one is how when a character, sprite, or model fades out, there's this super noticeable dithering effect. It's almost like a polka dot or diamond pattern when the fade effect happens. I've noticed this on a lot of Switch games where transparency occurs. The game also stutters during transitions, though you'll notice the frame rate does go up to 60 FPS during cutscenes as well as in the menus. It's only the 3D bits that are 30 FPS limited. In terms of sound, it's the usual. Lots of good songs, but nothing we haven't really heard before. You'll notice a lot of familiar tunes. Same with the sound effects. I think it's adequate. As usual, you can choose between Japanese and English voice acting. While the game isn't completely voiced, it's noticeably less voiced in English. This is nothing new, but normally you might not know if you haven't played the same story parts in both languages. I noticed that the parts where the characters are conversing while you're exploring are dubbed in Japanese, but not in English. When set to English, I sometimes miss bits of the conversation because I didn't notice. But those lines are voiced in the Japanese dub, so when I set it to Japanese, I can hear there's a conversation, and then I just look up and read what's being said. So yeah, that's my experience with Neptunia Sisters vs. Sisters for the Nintendo Switch. I think the highlight of the game is the story. It's got that old school Neptunia feel. Playable Maho and Andri are nice too. Where it falls apart a little bit is that those characters are Switch exclusives when they really needn't be. Also, I think that all the little extra polish in the areas of usability, playability, and graphics that existed on the PlayStation and PC versions, all of that is a little bit diminished on the Switch version because of the performance issues. But if you've played other NEP Switch games, this is probably all par for the course. I hope that was helpful. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.